Australia's new Foreign Minister Penny Wong will visit Fiji for talks with the nation's Prime Minister in an effort to bolster ties with the Pacific as China pushes Australia's neighbours to sign a sweeping security pact. Joining me live now is the Director of ASPI's Defence Strategy and National Security Program, Michael Shoebridge. Michael, let's start there. It's not just one Pacific nation now, as we all expected in the Solomon Islands, although we did think it would be one or two more. Now it looks as though it's going to be 10 of them. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Peter, you're right. The scale and speed of Beijing's ambition to really wield influence and have security presence in the South Pacific is enormous. That's what Foreign Minister Wang's new security pact that he's offering to 10 nations looks like to me. And really, engagement and climate change aren't a sufficient counter-proposal. So I think we've got to really think bigger, and we've got to realise the scale and speed that Beijing is moving at.
And when you say think bigger, what do you mean?
Well, I look at the policies that both major parties offered about the South Pacific over the election, and climate change is a net plus in the South Pacific, so that's great from the Labor Party. But really the rest was just more engagement and more aid. That's not going to work. That's why Beijing is finding this gap. We need to go bigger. We need to open our economy to the South Pacific peoples.
Yeah. We can't compete economically with China, and as the US referred to overnight, called them shady deals or shadowy deals. So what can we offer? What should we offer that China can't?
Well, instead of aid, what about broad access to our labour market? You know, South Pacific workers in our economy is something we need, and their money would go back home instead of aid. That's far preferable. But at the moment, we're tinkering around the edges. 3,000 permanent visas, a few thousand seasonal workers. We need a closer economic relations approach, like the one we have between Australia and New Zealand for the South Pacific.
A source told me last night too that why not look at sport? Why not expand football competitions? Meaning maybe the NRL or a national competition like that could play a part. Is that something that could help in your view?
I think it would, and that's what I'm talking about with this approach about opening our economy. It would be free travel between the small Pacific states, Australia and New Zealand, access to everything, sporting competitions, the labour market. And yes, religion and sport are defining advantages we have. Let's make use of them.
When it comes to these security deals and many of these Pacific nations, why do they even need security deals?
Well, they don't. And I think that's the other thing we've got to be much more frank about. For years we've said, oh, Chinese presence in the South Pacific, it's great, it can help you, and, we're open to that. Well, Wang is offering a dystopian future to the peoples of the South Pacific, bringing Chinese surveillance systems and technologies into the heart of their communities and training their police and security forces, maybe even having the kind of Chinese policing we see in Hong Kong and Shanghai present in the South Pacific. We've got to be much more honest about the dystopian downside of this offer from China.
Well, can it be said that these nations can eventually become targets? As we've seen in Sri Lanka at the moment, the economy is in the toilet, and it has now suffered as a result of debt trap diplomacy. So China's got much more of a foothold. So perhaps this is an indication of what will happen down the track.
I agree. I think the models we see in Africa and Sri Lanka and the troubles that Beijing's already brought are pretty clear. I think we're lucky in a way that Sogavare went out first with his deal, because it's a wake-up call to the other South Pacific leaders and their populations. But really, we need to go beyond just a little bit more of the same plus climate change.
And do you think Penny Wong can do that?
I do. I think the economic benefit to Australia of opening our labour market in a big way and opening visa-free travel to the small Pacific states is compelling. We need that. And it's so valuable for the South Pacific. But she'll have a lot of work to do with the public and with the cabinet.
Hey, just a final one here, Michael. I was interested to know that Anthony Albanese received a call or some communication from Emmanuel Macron after his election win. How do you read into that? Is that a suggestion that there may well not be a diplomatic freeze with the French for too long?
Well, I think, Emmanuel Macron is just recently re-elected. The worst case for Australia-France relations would have been Emmanuel Macron and Scott Morrison both being re-elected, because unfortunately it's deeply personal between those two, even though it was the right decision for Australia. So this is good news from Macron. I think unlike the message from Beijing, this is a real peace offering.
Okay. Michael Shoebridge, good to get your thoughts as always. We'll talk to you again soon.